think we have a complete disregard for our environments.
Water's drying up, which is kind of silly because it rains all the time everywhere.
35 to 38% of the greenhouse gases are produced by just 5 materials.
सरकार हमेशा बहुत अच्छी स्कीम्स लाता है, बट वो लोगों तक नहीं पहुंचती है.
There's so much research around solutions, so where is that gap?
We have found more than 25 ways of building earthquake-safe buildings without using cement.
What will people pay for? People will pay for design.
We thought of coming up with a model solution that can be easily replicated.
With analytical tools available, it really makes sense to use data to optimize design.
We're facing a climate emergency, but it's not irreversible if we act swiftly and decisively.
I wanted to build an Uber for waste. Every bit of waste is a resource.
The footprint of this project is hardly 20% of the entire site because the unbuilt is as important as the built.
Very quickly, I learned that the person making the big decisions was the person who is controlling the money.
I think adaptive comfort has to come back into picture.
You have to talk to the people. If you want the project to reach somewhere, you have to involve them in the process.
अगर कोई बहन एम्पावर हुई तो वो बेनिफिट पूरे एंटायर फैमिली को मिलेगा.
Tiling industry is massive. Even if you change 10% of it, there's a huge carbon emission saving that we would do.
Now this is suddenly sustainability that is offered not at a premium.
Disruption can bring the world to its knees, but it can also breed innovation. Is architecture just a tool to design spaces and buildings? Or can it be used as an instrument of social change, to build and rebuild society and communities? That's the theme of our episode today, with Kishan Shah and Manuni Patel of Compartment S4, an architecture and urban design studio with offices in Ahmedabad, Mumbai, and Bengaluru. So Kishan and Manuni, what I want to start with today is, and I want to be fair to our audience, while I'm sitting today with the two of you, you are an 8-partner firm, and that's a rarity in architectural practice. So how is it that 8 of you came together after college and you're doing what you're doing today?
So it started with our old SEP days when we were all together. We are good friends back in SEP. We spent like 6 years, and through our discussions in general when we were having lunch, we had this idea of forming a company, and we wanted to do something for the public. And then the idea came about, like, yeah, let's form a studio. And all of us came from different backgrounds. We had different skill sets. And so it just clicked, and we happen to be like almost 7 years old now. So yeah.
And where did the name come from?
One of our professors used to call us for discussions, and we had like hopchas where all of us used to sit, and what our bay was called like the S4. So whenever you used to call us for discussions, Compartment S4, like the S4 dabba, come here. So, and then it started organically. Our WhatsApp group name was that. And then while we were forming our company, we had a lot of discussions that what should be the name of our company. It was a lengthy discussion for about 2 to 3 months, and then we were like, let's go for this. We are actually a traveling studio. We do work at different sort of places. So it just clicked, and we like got stuck with the name.
And how's it been? Because you guys have been working now for about 6 years, right? How do you navigate working with 8 people across different offices?
So when we started practice, it was more like all 8 of us were very excited to just work and do something, actually make something on ground. Now, when we look back at those days, we've sort of grown into having different skill sets for the 8 of us. And also, we work a lot even within the different offices. So it's not like the Ahmedabad office or the Bangalore office functions independently, but there's always an interchange of ideas, interchange of people working within the studio. So I think within the 8 of us, we have this understanding, and we have the sort of idea of doing something exciting and challenging all the time. So that's what has kept us glued in the last 7 years.
What Manu, you also mentioned there, of working for the publics, and what even you said that you're looking for something exciting and challenging. I think the focus of our episode today is on the idea of social sustainability, and it has multiple facets. The very first one is the idea of social justice. How can we create better systems in which society can work, and how people can come into the mainstream? So I want to understand, you're a fairly young firm. Where did that intent come from of working, like you said, for the larger good?
So basically, the idea of social justice came from how we started working together was that the idea of architecture is very urban centric. So as a practice, we wanted to also step into the rural realm, look at how an architect can also sort of, through a small intervention, bring in a larger change. So that's how we 8 of us and our energy started matching. And the idea of social justice also is manifold for us. I think whether it's gender or whether it's rural versus urban, whether it's the kind of resources that are available and how you bring them and their perspective into design becomes a very important and challenging part.
And I think one of the projects that you've done is the pink toilet project. And I think you've done toilets in many, many towns and villages across the country. And I think that's very reminiscent of, again, what you were saying, that sometimes people in rural areas do not have access to the same facilities that we have access to. And it again cuts across gender and other sort of community lines. So how did that project come about, and what do you think that has done for the community?
Basically, we try to always pitch for projects in a way that, if we identify a need in the society, then we would want to do our little part as architects. How can we intervene? So there is a huge problem of sanitation in the rural parts of India, in urban as well, and especially for women, because their access to public sanitation is quite a problem in our country. So Pink Toilet, for example, was one of such projects which we later took up with the government, and we wanted to expand the program to include even other things like feeding rooms, like sort of pad vending machines. All aspects related to hygiene for women was what we wanted to cover. And also the idea that why is public toilets or the idea of sanitation considered like a taboo in our country? So we wanted in the design and sort of the making of the structure, bring in elements that people were more familiar with. So let's say we built the pink toilet in Uttarakhand, or we even pitched for other toilets with the UNICEF. The idea was always, how do we contextualize or localize that so that people do not look at it as a foreign object. They look at it more like, okay, it belongs to us, we have to use it. And there is a certain sense of ownership in that process.
There are a lot of elements that we try to use in the structure. A small thing like adding a diya corner, giving nice louvered windows. So that, and then after that, creating a manual for this. We documented the entire process, and we made a construction manual so that it can be circulated across various sarpanches in different villages. So that was a sort of a model that we wanted to promote, and through architecture, we are trying to resolve that.
How many of these toilets have actually been built at this point?
As far as we know, pink toilets, we know of 7 of them. All 7 of them have been extremely different. Because in the manual, we also suggested different materials that they can be used. Based on, let's say, even in Uttarakhand, there are the hills and there are plains. So depending on what terrain you are, you might have access to different kinds of materials.
And also different kinds of skill sets.
Skill sets, exactly. Yeah. So we suggested options in that manual. So then we could see variations of our own design being built in different spaces because of that.
I think even with the urban junction project that you're doing in Bangalore, but I know there's hope to do it in other places as well. I think even that started with a very similar process, right?
So for our projects in Bangalore, we've been pitching for different junctions and different smaller pockets of public spaces that can actually create a larger sort of impact. There is the idea of public safety and the idea of public access. So smaller things like how can kids cross roads, or why don't we have like better footpaths, or how can we make junctions safer for pedestrians and give equal access to all kinds of stakeholders that are involved in the urban realm. And the idea of such projects, for example, there was a project in which we were working for under a flyover. We realized after doing certain engagements there that it was a space which was having safety issues for women. We completely scrapped our old design and we had to change everything. So I think cues from people help us a lot in design, and public safety, public access is very important and integral to our design process.
I think the next thread through which we view social sustainability is participation of people, and the idea of democracy, the idea that there are no hierarchical systems at play that can determine the outcomes, right? So how do you ensure that the largest segment of people have a stake in what you're creating as designers? And I want to understand from you, you worked on a really amazing project called Basa in Uttarakhand, where there was a process of participation from the design stage to the building stage. As architects, you're usually taught, and that's how you're trained, that you become the sole sort of holder of knowledge and wisdom. So how was that process like for you? What did you learn through that project?
Basa as a project is very close to our hearts. We went to the one of the district magistrates in Uttarakhand and we pitched that project. They wanted to increase tourism in one of the villages called Khirsu, and we started approaching the sarpanch. They told, because in Uttarakhand women are like the forefront and they always run the whole entire economy. They run the house. So we started talking to them and we got cues from them that they need a community kitchen where they can, like, they wanted to promote tourism through their homestays. So the idea of a tourism center, which is Basa, that came about. And so one of the aspects about when we were interviewing them was there is a lot of produce in that village. We built a space for them where there is a community kitchen and there is a display space on the top where we documented a lot of things from the village. So there are a lot of festivals that they celebrate. There are a few treks that happen in and around the village. And then whenever there is a tourist, that space becomes like an epicenter where they could book on homestay. The idea of how women have guided this entire process of what all they wanted. So there's an interaction that happens, and that creates a very different sort of value that generates sort of a new conversation with newer people and with the locals.
So another thing that was very special about this project was that all through the construction process, you were also, again, able to involve the community. What was that process like for you?
Basically, the community, with whatever project we do, it's always a give and take. With the community, we are always learning something from them, but there are also times when we are sort of giving something to them. So, for example, in the case of Basa, in the construction phase, we were working with the local masons. There was no famous sort of contractor from Delhi or Bombay coming and working there. So, for example, the Gabion walls used for like retaining walls or bridges. But the idea of using it in actual structures there was something that was new to them and they picked up on it. And then there were instances where things like wattle and daub, things like mud plaster were things they were so familiar with that we just had to tell them that we are thinking of doing this, and it was probably done in a few days. So that also another concept of Shramdan, for example, in which we were very closely connected with the sarpanch or the village head of the area. And they would sort of encourage people to also join in and go and have a look at what is being done. And in that process, people would just voluntarily come and work with us. So the idea of Shramdan, or as you would translate it, the donation of labor, it makes people very connected to the space. It sort of, everyone feels that they have given something of theirs to this space.
I think that's a beautiful example because, again, it talks about how there are these existing societal systems and frameworks in place, and how sometimes as architects, we can also harness some of these systems to the advantage, obviously, of the building process, but also of the maintenance process of how these buildings can then sustain over time and can integrate themselves into communities. I think another very important thing that you brought about here, as you're working with local masons and you're working with local materials also, the idea of livelihoods was another part of social sustainability. How can we ensure that our people and our communities everywhere have access to opportunities, have access to the economy?
If I just take the example of Basa itself, like Manuni was stating, we try to encourage that the space is made as well as run by the locals itself. So, for example, whenever we go to a space, we always identify people that can help us in sort of getting these cues, whether it's to help spread the word for the project, or to identify people who can actually help run the space. And that can only be possible, of course, in rural scenarios. So again, like in the example of Basa, the government itself then recognized these group and trained them to run the tourism center. They taught them how do you explain the map of the space. So like in Basa, it was the self-help group which was taking up everything. And they were also taking the earnings from that. So it sort of creating a microeconomy in some way, creating livelihoods for people, not only in the process of construction, like you said, where people are employed to build that thing, so they earn out of it, but even after that, they can even run the space.
So I think just that one project that you did became then the epicenter and led to this creation of this new microeconomy for tourism within that villages.
Adding to that point, one of the things that we did in Basa was, since there was a lot of produce that was happening, we wanted to market those. So we created a logo, we created a brand identity for the women to sell those products. We packaged them so that looks a little bit formal. So that also gives a niche to those products. These are organic products that they are selling, which is produced locally from the village, and that also creates a livelihood for the women. And because of this, even the government allotted them a storage space behind the structure, so where they could store things, where they could run all these market apart from the food cooking and stuff. It is a very evolving process, even for the women who have been running this since I think 3 to 4 years now, and they have generated quite a lot of income. The rooms go on a tariff of up to 2,500 per night. So it's lovely to go there and visit and stay there.
I think another way to look at this, to look at the idea of social sustainability is, do we have enough spaces in our cities and our towns and our villages to actually go out, to live, to breathe, to grow, to engage with society, because society is the bedrock on which our civilization stands. And you notice that our cities get more and more denser. Number of spaces, public spaces, is declining very rapidly. And this is the common thread that we see in your work. In every project that you've done, there's some sense of looking at space as a vital resource and giving back to the community. So I want you to talk a little bit about that, especially in the context of this project that you did in Mumbai, which is the Nepean Sea Road steps.
A lot of our projects, we've also tried that whatever is existing, how can we amplify it, how can we make it better, and so that people can start using it. Sometimes it's very small cues, like for example, in Nepean Sea Road, there was an existing set of steps that connected two roads on two different levels. And then there was sort of an empty patch, empty barren patch of garden. So what we tried to do through that project was we tried to merge these two spaces, create larger platforms, larger steps, where people can actually go and occupy space. People can sort of appropriate the space in the ways they want. And they can also basically start doing things like putting up pop-up book exhibitions. And apart from that, I mean, of course, Nepean Sea Road is of course considered to be a very posh area. What has also started happening is that the people who are the working class in that area also do not have any space to just sit for a while. The people who are working on Swiggy, on Zomato, people who are doing like working with Airtel, or they get a space to rest. They between their shifts they have some time to rest in that space, which originally there was no space like that. When we talk about public projects, these are almost mandatory, because even when we started work, it wasn't like participation was okay. We learned this idea, let's put it into our designs. It was more like there is no way out when you're working in rural or urban areas. You have to talk to the people. If you want the project to reach somewhere, you have to involve them in the process. Otherwise, it's going to be just a structure that was created and left as it is.
We also did one project near to Nainital. There was a old British cemetery, which was in a very dilapidated condition, you can say, not being used. So one of the brief was that you need to activate the space. There was this idea of how can you engage public and how can you create a public space, because cemetery is a very sensitive space to do something, because of its nature. So we did a very minimal thing of creating a sensory park. We created installations where based on 5 senses. One is touch, feel, listen, hear. So all those sort of where installation where people could just walk in, sit for a while, and just enjoy nature and come back. It was a space for the people of Nainital who are local tourists.
So I think the idea that there are certain structures existing, rather than breaking them up, how can we how can we convert them into public spaces where people can go have free access? So small museums, anganwadis, public parks, smaller coffee shops. We try to also look at the idea of adaptive reuse in public space. And how can you merge these two ideas and make those spaces more accessible to public as well?
Which of these projects have you guys gone back to after a few years? And sometimes it's just heartwarming to see how the community accepts something. Do you have an example or a story like that?
I think, of course, Basa, like she mentioned, has been very close to our hearts. We keep going back to that place, and stories of how they started earning, how the families have started getting better, how people have also started hosting people at their homes. There has started some kind of a cultural exchange between the urban and the rural, has always been a heartwarming story for us. Apart from that, also the different toilet projects. We haven't gone back, but we keep receiving images. For example, we already talked about Pink Toilet, right? That was supposed to be a project in which we created manuals so that those projects can be built again, and people have the agency to keep building them again and again. So different contractors, local contractors would send us images of how they interpreted our design and made it their own design, which for us is a very interesting thing to see how, I mean, design is not something that we need to put on a pedestal. We can make it accessible to people. People can give their inputs, people can make it their own according to us.
And that's truly the only way to democratize something like that. Right from the get-go, you've been working on public projects, on government projects. You've worked from Ahmedabad to Bangalore to Uttarakhand, and you've worked with about 20 or more government bodies at this stage. Now, for a young practitioner looking up at you at this point who also wants to follow a similar journey, how do they get started on something like this?
Always there is passion that comes in when you're young. When we were in our college days, that passion was like, just go to people, just talk to them, start pitching to them. So one of our starting points was approaching the government here in Ahmedabad, asking them, are there any projects that we can contribute to? So they gave us few village names. We went around, we spoke to the sarpanch. So through that, we built a portfolio for us. And that portfolio helped us in taking it to further and taking it to different sarpanches across Uttarakhand. One of the DM of Uttarakhand, who sanctioned us the Basa project, loved this idea. And then that started as a base thing. After that, we sort of got empaneled in Uttarakhand. We are currently doing more than 15 to 20 projects. And then once the base of Uttarakhand was set, we were parallelly trying to get projects in Bangalore and Bombay. So trying to find ways of how to get that project done. It sometimes happens in a special projects category, or sometimes we might not be able to get that project done also. So there are a lot of proposals that we have made. Out of maybe around 100 proposals we would have made, maybe 20 would have, or maybe 15 would have been recognized. So it's a hard struggle, but since we are 8 of us, that rigor and that enthusiasm we have, that we don't want to lose on that project.
And how have competitions and awards helped you along this process? I know you guys have won quite a few competitions and awards from the United Nations, from WRI, and even the Aga Khan Trust for Architecture. I mean, that was amazing for people at this level to win the Aga Khan Award. So how has that helped you, pitch for projects sometimes to get through doors?
Competition has helped us a lot. It has helped us create a credibility through which whenever we take those projects to and show it to government, they would believe in us. It is, for example, the competition that we won, the Resilient Homes Challenge, where we build an earthquake-prone house. That project was pitched initially to the district magistrate of Uttarakhand, and he loved the design. And then we told that we can repurpose the design for our tourism center for Basa. It was pretty amazing.
Also, adding to that, for the competition, which was a Mumbai Street Lab competition for WRI, we did not win that competition, but the whole Nepean Sea Steps project came into fruition because in the competition we were dealing with the Nepean Sea Road as a site, and we were pitching for that. So I think what has happened is competitions have become trigger points to get into different arenas of design for us, and also good sort of a package that we can show to people that this is like we can also do as a young firm. Also, we can design larger things. We can design things that make a change, because otherwise it's difficult for people to trust you when you are so young into practice. So competitions became a way to sort of break that barrier and get into larger public projects for us.
I think as we now end this conversation, I want to get into where you're heading into the future. Societal change or larger good projects, there's only so much that any one practice or any one studio can do. You need to scale this up if you want to create massive change. So from that perspective, I understand that from the starting, you guys have been working on creating awareness through books, through manuals, through magazines, through blogs, and sometimes even exhibitions. So when did you realize that was an important part of practice that you must involve yourself in? And what value do you see that adds the kind of change you want to create?
I think we did a few projects to realize that sometimes when you build something, it might not lead to anything. It might just be a building and be there. It's through that process that we got to the idea of making manuals, for example, like again in the example of pink toilet or other toilets, Anganwadis, for example. We've also built manuals for how you can create learning spaces for children, which we had given for Uttarakhand. So we realized that that is the way in which you can involve other people into design and democratize the process or the sacrosanct space of design, and give people the agency to start owning up and doing things in their own ways. Apart from that, also engaging as a practice, we also wanted to keep our foot into education. So for example, we have a biannual magazine called Unmute, which sort of touches base in between the points of education and architectural education and practice. So we engage a lot with different kinds of people from different professions in our studio, which through something called the FNCs, or the Friday Night Conversations. And those conversations sort of distill into larger topics or ideas, which we then later take up into as a publication to create some kind of architecture discourse, which is also just beyond talking about projects or talking about the issues that we face in practice. whether it's related to housing, whether it's related to how do you take up the concept of participatory design into practice. So the idea of publications, workshops, all sort of bind up to create sort of an amalgamation of things which helps us grow. Because sometimes by just designing, you stop growth. And these things make us look back as to what we've done, and also make us look into the future as to what are more possibilities of the same thing growing into.
Also adding to that exhibitions have also helped us sensitize people, whoever is coming, what is the cultural fabric. They could understand how locally they can live here. And also one of the examples in Bangalore that we are going to do about street furniture, we are going to do small pop-up exhibitions to understand what is street furniture, how can people use that, what are their cues on that. So smaller workshops of that will be conducted sooner, and through that we will involve people in the design process.
We're trying to do certain smaller exhibitions, street exhibitions, so that people can get sensitized to this idea. We get to know the view of people. It could also be that no one really wants it. But I think as a collaborative, 8 of us, I mean, the idea of collaboration, whether it's amongst the 8 of us, where someone can just pop up and say that this is bullshit, why are you doing this? Or sometimes the people who come up and say that, why are you even doing anything here? This is wrong money spent. And in public projects, you need that reality to be exposed sometimes. How can we make the process of design more richer and keep striving to do things that are better for public and for the people?
I think I couldn't agree more. So thank you so much, both of you, for sitting down with us today.
Thanks a lot.
As we head into an uncertain future, our knowledge, resources, and technology may help solve some of the biggest challenges facing us today. But this journey will be cut short if our fundamental societal structures break down in the process. Our conversation today with Compartment S4 highlights how architecture can help preserve, reinforce, and sometimes even transform the fabric of our society, and that it's never too soon for architects to understand and to leverage this opportunity.